I had a phone call from the archives of Hampshire Constabulary. Are you the person that's interested in the James Camm Porthole murder case? Yes, I am. Why? We may have some papers down here you may be interested in. Would you like to look at them? I said, yes, I would. I went down there within 24 hours and I was wholly surprised by what I saw. I was expecting 1 or 2 pieces of paper and to be given 2 large boxes of material. And when I looked at it, I could clearly see the original papers. Previously, books have been written, articles have been written, but this is the first time where all the information has been known. It was a wonderful find.
After you entered the cabin, what happened next?
There was a certain amount of preliminary love play and then sexual intercourse took place.
What happened in the end?
Just as intercourse would normally have come to an end, she suddenly heaved under me as though she were gasping for breath, as though she was taking a deep breath.
What happened to her body?
It stiffened for a fraction of a second and then relaxed, completely limp.
What did you do when her body showed these symptoms?
I immediately got off the bed. She was completely relaxed, as though in a dead faint. One eye was just slightly open, her mouth was a little open too. There was a faint line of bubbles which I assumed to be froth, just on the edge of her lips. It was a muddy colour and appeared to be blood-flecked.
And what did you decide to do?
I confess now it sounds very foolish, but I hoped to give the impression that she had fallen overboard and deny all knowledge of having been to that cabin.
What were you going to do then?
Dispose of her body by pushing it through the porthole.
What did you actually do?
I lifted her up and pushed her through.
It was a very animated trial overseen by Justice Hilbrey. Joshua Caswell KC led the counsel for Camm's defence, but by far the most flamboyant character in the Great Hall during the trial was Geoffrey Roberts KC, the leader of the counsel for the prosecution. His questioning of Camm was intense.
Would you describe yourself as a truthful man?
I think so.
You were the last person to see Miss Gibson alive.
Yes.
You put her through the porthole at 3 a.m. on the morning of 18th of October.
Yes.
Did you for the next 8 days make untrue statements regarding this?
I did, yes.
When did you decide to alter your story?
In the police headquarters.
Why?
I realised by then that I was definitely incriminated by Steer.
Don't you call that curious conduct for a truthful person?
I should say it was beastly conduct.
You were quite satisfied that you had not been identified as the man in the cabin?
Yes, I thought so at the time.
So what necessity was there to do anything but slip out of the cabin?
My intention was to give the impression she had disappeared of her own accord.
If she was found dead in her cabin, no one could know if anyone had been in there.
Inquiries might have been made, and I might have been incriminated.
The early part of the cross-examination asked him a number of times whether he'd given an honest account, and he had to concede that he hadn't because he had changed his story.
Can you imagine what it must have felt like to have been on trial here? The judge sat under King Arthur's round table, the jury clinging onto your every word. The very place where Sir Walter Raleigh was told he was to be hung, drawn and quartered. Now you're in the dock, fighting for your life. What we need to get a flavour of the atmosphere at the time is to find someone who was actually here.
In 1948, Peggy Durant was just 18 years old. She was the jury's summoning officer and still clearly remembers the time James Camm took to the dock.
He was a very debonair little chap. He could hardly see above the dock. Of course, in his uniform, he looked quite suave.
However, in the Great Hall, things took an unexpected turn for Peggy when, like Gay Gibson, she was pushed through the porthole.
It was during a lunch hour. There was nobody in court except myself and a couple of policemen. And as I happened to be there, they said, Peg, do you think that you could get through the porthole? I said, no, I couldn't get through there. At any rate, they lifted me up and I had to go very, very limp. For years, I never even thought about it. I still can't make up my mind whether he did or didn't. No, there's doubts in my mind.
The story of the trial and the tragic events have been mentioned in many publications, but perhaps one of the strangest references is actually in a book about one of my comedy heroes. Sid James was one of Britain's much-loved stars. I can remember watching Carry On films on video many, many times. But one author claims that he had a link to Gay Gibson.
In a biography written by author Cliff Goodwin, he alleges Sid James had an affair with Gay Gibson in 1946. He also stated that after her death, Sid was questioned by police upon suspicion of arranging her murder.
If it wasn't so serious, it would be hilarious. I mean, Sid's involvement with Gay Gibson is complete and utter nonsense.
What advice would you give to a man asked to judge a beauty contest for the first time?
Leave your wife at home, mate.
People think of Sid James as the carry-on actor and Hancock's Half Hour and all that, but he was a massive star in South Africa. Then he came to England to make his fortune.
I did a lot of research on this, and the bottom line here is that Gay Gibson was not in South Africa in 1946.
There's no evidence at all. But unfortunately, because of this book and because of, you know, the internet, and you can sort of search the case and it comes up with Sid James every single time, he's now associated with this case. A lot of people forget that the carry-on actors, they're real people. They're just actors playing parts.
Despite the allegations published by author Cliff Goodwin, there is nothing mentioned in the formal police files about any investigation of Sid James.
In your association with Miss Gibson in her cabin that night, you received no injuries from her at all?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
You're not suggesting some of them were caused by Miss Gibson?
Some of them might have been. What I said was that I had caused the original scratches.
This is what you said in your statement. I received no injury of any sort while in the company of Miss Gibson. Do you want to alter that now?
No.
These are the actual photographs taken by the police of the scratches on James Camm's body. The medical aspects of the case are obviously a key part of what was supposed to help the jury decide upon the actual events of the time. What we need, though, is more clear information about Gay Gibson, the state of her health. Remarkably, I've managed to track down someone who was with Gay in 1947, just before she boarded the Durban Castle for that fateful voyage.
Her last performance in South Africa was in a play called Golden Boy. In the cast was a young lady who would later become a familiar face on British television in the sitcom One Foot in the Grave.
She wasn't a well girl. And this is important because it was part of what I gave to the defense when they came out to see me. I saw her faint during rehearsal. I knew that she went blue. I knew nothing about medicine really, but you know, they said, oh, this is a heart condition she's got.
When she went blue, how did she go blue? Was it her...
Round her mouth.
Really?
Yes.
And what about her hands? Did you...
Yes, and she bit her nails and her hands went sort of bluish. I don't know why I remember this, but I did. We shared a dressing room and she was very kind and warm and friendly, but this was somebody who knew about travel and knew about being with important people and so on. And she had older boyfriends. I remember her having a big argument with Mike Abel and accusing him of making her pregnant.
Doreen originally wanted to come to England to help the defence team by giving evidence about Gay's poor health, but her father talked her out of going. However, her colleague Mike Abel did make the journey.
What was your general impression of her health?
That she was ill. I mean, time and again at my house when I gave a party for her and the cast, she went out into the garden and fainted. On another occasion, she was walking across the road outside the theatre and suddenly fainted in the centre.
You were there then and saw her faint?
Yes.
Did you notice anything about her face then?
I noticed that in the corners of her mouth was white saliva.
Did you notice anything about her lips?
There was a slight bluish colour.
The health of Gay Gibson is an incredibly important part of this trial. In fact, you could argue that the verdict really depends on it. Why? Well, if Gay Gibson did suffer from any sort of health condition that could have led to sudden natural death, it increases the chances of misadventure or even manslaughter. In other words, James Camm could be telling the truth.
You are the mother of Eileen Gibson.
Yes, I'm very proud to be the mother of Eileen Gibson.
Generally speaking, for the whole of her life, how was her health?
Excellent. She was one of the finest types of English womanhood, physically, mentally, and morally.
In December 1946, did you hear that she'd been taken ill?
Never.
Did you know your daughter was going about with several men in Johannesburg?
My daughter was not going about with men. She was not interested in men. Her career was her life.
Do you know that she was telling everybody that she was pregnant?
My daughter was not pregnant.
The account of Gay Gibson's character, as described by her own mother, simply doesn't fit with what other witnesses from the time have said. It does seem that most people were aware of her having some form of a problem. And there might be one way that we could definitely find out.
Within the police files saved by the Hampshire Police Society from destruction, there's an item that actually belonged to Gay, her hairbrush, and on it some very obvious strands of hair. Could these hold genetic information about her health? After a lot of research, I managed to track down one of the world's leading organisations for genetic examinations. Based in the United States, they are the people who could tell me what secrets the hair on the brush could be holding.
What can we actually get from the hair, bearing in mind it's 70 years